And we are recording. And Chair, you can go ahead and start the meeting.
All right, I will call this special meeting of the Mountain View Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee to order. And Brandon, could you do a roll call?
Sure. Chair Kuzma.
Present.
Vice Chair Stone.
Present.
Member Barton.
Present.
Member Fenwick.
Present.
Member Adamick.
Here.
Chair Kuzma, all present.
Thank you. We will now move on to item 3, oral communications from the public. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the committee on any matter not on the agenda. Speakers on 3 minutes. State law prohibits the committee from acting on items. For anyone on Zoom, you can raise your hand to make a general public comment. You can also press star 9 if you're dialed in. But first, do we have any public commenters in the room? Nope. Do we have anyone on the Zoom, Brandon?
We do not.
Great. Then we will close general public comment. We will move to item 4, the minutes approval. This and item 4.1, approving the meeting minutes from the March 29th, 2023 meeting. I guess, are there any public comments on the meeting minutes? Seeing none, I was not present for this meeting. I have reviewed the minutes, but I will be abstaining from any motion as general principle. Would anyone like to make a motion regarding the minutes or make any comments regarding the minutes?
Valerie will move to pass them. I did review them and they look accurate.
Okay. Do you have a second? I'll second. Member Barton seconds. Let us have a vote on all approving the motion to approve the minutes. All opposed. And I will abstain, so that is members of Thomas, Fenwick, Stone, and Barton approving minutes, and myself abstaining. We will now move to item 5, unfinished business. We have no unfinished business, fortunately. And that brings us to item 6.1, the fiscal year 2023 to 2024 through fiscal year 2027 to 2028 capital improvement program. I assume we have a presentation on this.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Members. As you mentioned, I'm Ed Orengo. I'm the assistant. So we're here to provide the committee an overview of the capital program for the interim CIP. It's obtained your input with guide staff in the preparation for that. Hopefully we can
Just 1 second. I need to share screen and I kind of not used to this. There we go. Okay, next slide. Sorry about that.
For background, the CIP
Oh, maybe you could sit up more and speak really slowly. Yeah, because it picks up from right here.
No.
Oh, it picks up from.
Should have done that.
Should be okay, when you have a walk around. All right, yes.
And did I be heard clearly? Okay, I can make sure to enunciate clearly.
Yeah, for the audience, remotely, make extra effort to speak up and speak clearly.
Thank you, Director.
But staff will also do, I will move to the back of the computer. every of the BPAC members, if you can slide down.
Let's fix it all. Other things we want to do. I mean. Oh, there we go. I'll bring the, sorry, these are.
Okay, still there.
Oh, even one? Just have to take my-
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for your patience.
Probably.
Okay, as I was mentioning, discretionary projects are those projects that do not meet the non-discretionary criteria. Outlining in attachment 1 to your memo is a study session memo presented to council at the April 3rd meeting. And the next two slides are highlighted the funding sources and constraints presented at that study session. Please look. Okay, great. As a very brief overview, the city CIP is funded from various sources, broken into the 5 funding categories on here, with the specific funding sources shown in the bullet points, each with specific parameters having may be used. The most flexible funds that generally can be used for any type of capital project are the unrestricted funds, making them extremely valuable. The key challenges the city is experiencing in identifying a number of types of projects, including a CIP, are staffing vacancies and the recent high inflation impacts. So we expect additional staffing resources in the near term. Given the number of projects, it will take us some time to catch up with our active projects. Consistent with much of the region and nation, the city is experiencing an increase in inflation and cost rise with both labor and materials. Over the last couple of years, the San Francisco region's construction cost index has increased between 5 and 15%. That's the highest practice in the 5 to 10% inflation adjustment. We roll forward funds, but that is insufficient to come up with the costs. To address this, staff is recommending a 10% increase to new projects with construction planning next year. Already funded projects need additional funding will be presented to council for this. Looking at the 10-year historic trend of the average number of new CIP projects added each year, you'll see that between 2013 and 2020, averages 50 years, reduced to 44.5 in 21, and council supports staff's approach to limit the number of new projects that have to work on.
Could you show? Getting a text that they can't hear you.
Okay. How about we turn it?
Maybe move the left.
Yeah, just point the laptop at.
It's the direction.
Okay.
Okay. All right, let's try that. Oh, let me just do this. Great, that whole name is working. So there are currently 351 active CIP projects comprised of roughly a 40-60 split between non-discretionary and discretionary projects. Table 2 in your memo provides a status update of current CIP projects with active transportation improvements. And looking at a summary of how these active projects relate to the Integrated Vision Zero Action Plan, Local Road Safety Plan, and suggested last school, we know that 13 projects are located on the high injury network, 15 at locations with known collision history between 2014 and 2019. 20 are applying known proven countermeasures, and 15 of the projects are along school routes. The 4 remaining projects are not of these types of locations, as they are focused on paving projects, and we are integrating bike impediments with these paving projects. An example of a paving project is the Miramani Avenue Improvements Project we recently reviewed that has added a cycle track component and the road diamond. As previously noted, staff presented this information to council at a study session on April 3rd, requesting input on projects scheduled to roll forward, new projects, and council's priorities. Council provided feedback on 9 projects, directing staff to prioritize or continue to prioritize the first 8 projects shown here, with the last project, the North Bay Shore branding and wayfinding signage and installation, to be deferred. As a summary, staff is recommending that all the roll forward projects, except for one, be included in the 5-year CIP. The one project for exception is the Central Expressway Bike and Pedestrian Crossing Villa Underpass. This one is recommended to be moved to the unscheduled list. Delivery of this project will be by Caltrain, as their policy is that they design and construct projects across their roadway right of way. Caltrain is working on 3 undercrossing projects in Mountain View: the Transit Center, Rainstorm, and Bernard, including other basin projects and water basin. We don't expect the council to have the capacity to start this crossing to Villa until other projects are completed. Additionally, construction funding of approximately $35 million for this project is not yet been identified. The city was successful in being awarded one Bay Area grant or OBAG program grants for 3 projects: the Middlefield Road Complete Streets, Moffett Boulevard Complete Streets, and El Camino Real Escuela El Monte intersection improvements. This will be recommended in the CIP as either amendments to existing projects or new projects. Lastly, we're also evaluating 3 other projects to recommend incorporating to the 5-year CIP that include Evelyn Avenue cycle tracks from Franklin to the city limits with Sunnyvale and Florida, El Camino Real's protected intersections, including at Castro, and the Stevens Creek Trail extension from Heatherstone Way to Remington Drive and Mountain View High School. After receiving the committee's direction tonight, staff will present the recommended CIP to council in May for a second study session, Parks and Recreation Commission. Afterward, followed by the council adoption in June of the recommended 5-year CIP. That concludes my presentation with the questions shown here for committee's discussion.
Is there anything we want to do to adjust the Zoom setup performance?
Yes, we do. Here's what we'll do. I will send an invitation to you with the laptops. That will allow you to utilize your mic or computers. And so whoever speaking, if they're by computer, or speaking to that computer, we'll mute this one so it doesn't echo. The 3 of us will have to show them the computer.
I'm very well.
And just the telephone, this see who's going to perform in, and then that by telephone.
I
don't want to, if you've never used it, then let's not touch it.
Right.
Okay.
So let me pause for 2 to 3 minutes while I send out these invites to the 3 of you. And that should do it.
And you can also say to me if there's, we don't have problem.
We'll just leave it on.
No, it's not
He said it was going in and out.
I was.
Yeah, not, it does that if I'm on a Zoom call, if I'm not right out. Yes, I will send it to you too. That'll work. So I'm resending to you, Ria. I will resend to you in just a second. So that, Ed, you just should have just got the invitation. And now I'm gonna add James. Okay. Okay. Import from CSV list, import. There is. We'll probably send something to Jim Curry. But that's fine. Valerie. Terry's gonna get one. Just a second, and James, you should get one once I press save. Someone do that now. Is it possible, Terry, that you could share with this member Stone?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Actually, no, he was added too, so you both should have it. So do what you want to do. I'm probably doing both. I'm going to keep it for the slides, if that's okay. Now I'm going to mute it once we have a speaker. Then I will mute. So that'll be you. Are you on? Okay. Okay. And your mic is working. Okay, so since I'm not going to be speaking much, I'm going to turn my mic off. James, go ahead and speak. You want to unmute?
All right. Well, I see the little audio bar moving on my thing.
All right.
I'm going to assume those on the webinar can hear me. We will move. Well, since I have my thing open, who would like to ask questions next?
I had a question, is the audio okay, about, so there was timeline for the different projects and it seemed like everything was going to happen like 2024, 2025, like a huge number of projects. Is that more of a placeholder or is that consistent with the pace of projects currently? This is not in your presentation, but in the materials.
Sure. So you're speaking to the schedules that were identified in the yes. So if we put down a estimated construction or estimated completion date, that's the date that we look at evaluating. We've looked at evaluating based on staff resources of when we can fit in the project and when we expect to get it started or finished.
Okay, and currently, like in 2023, how many active transportation projects are being constructed?
I had to look at the list. There's just a handful. So we outline in the memo, just in table 2, just those in design. I see that. In construction, is that your question?
Yes.
Active transportation projects in construction. So we have projects in construction. I'm trying to line up those ones that have active transportation improvements. We have some that are about to start construction. We just opened bids on the Leon Fairchild paving project. This is one of those projects that are paving projects that include bike and ped improvements as a component of the project. So there's one. I don't think we have anything in construction right now that has active transportation, but Leon Fairchild. And then the other one is the Park Sonia reconstruction project that we are reconstructing both Park Drive and Sonia. It's a full reconstruction with new sidewalks, curb ramps.
And Caltrans is also delivering project for us.
Thank you for that reminder. So Caltrans is working on the full El Camino Real improvement project. And that hasn't started construction, but they did get authorization to bid the project, and we do expect that to start construction this calendar year. And that has a list of active transportation components, including the buffered bike lanes, some protected bike lanes, bulb outs, curb ramps. Is it 3 mid-block crossings? It's new mid-block crossings across El Camino Real.
And so what is going to change? Because I think for these projects, Caltrans is not involved, or maybe they are, I don't know, or it's not as major as El Camino. So now going from like 2 projects to, I didn't count them up, but it's like a whole lot more projects. Like what is going to change between now and then that will enable the city to do so much?
So I think this speaks to the part of the presentation I mentioned about staff resources. So really, we've been really struggling with the staff resources. And in order to really be able to deliver projects, it's a combination of not only funding, but having the staffing available to do those projects. We have several grant funded projects that have priority grant funding that we're prioritizing right now. But really the change is we're anticipating that we'll be fully staffed and we'll be able to deliver the projects that we've outlined.
So there's no, like, the current, there's, in your opinion, is there no need to further whittle down the projects besides the Villa undercrossing?
That's what we're recommending. Yeah, based on what we expect on the workload and capacities, our recommendation is what we've put forward, not to add any additional projects. And any additional projects that are recommended by the committee, we would need to evaluate that, and something would have to get deferred. One would have to give. We only have capacity for what we've recommended.
Audio, so hopefully this won't cause any echoes. Everyone can hear me. I had a question on one of the projects you showed in this presentation, and this may be something I missed. I've been going back trying to pull up the agenda, but the Stevens Creek extension, and I didn't see that in the packet as being included. And in fact, I know we got some public comment on that. So that is planned to be included. The Stevens Creek Trail extension that was on like 2 or 3 slides back on the presentation. There, additional evaluations. So is that
Yes.
project planned?
So there's 2 components to the project. The short answer is yes, that the project is planned. This is one of those projects that, as I mentioned, it's been difficult to assign staff resources to because of lack of staff resources. So we do plan, there's a current active project to start the design. It's scheduled as a 2020 project. And again, we're trying to catch up on projects. So we'll be assigning a project manager this calendar year to start the design of that project. And the construction component of that project was on the unscheduled list, or is on the unscheduled list. So we're going to be moving that off the unscheduled list onto the 5-year CIP for construction. But we're anticipating in the neighborhood of a $35 million project that we'll have to fund, that we don't have the funding sources identified yet, but we'll put a placeholder in to identify that we're looking to get construction funding and move it to the 5-year CIP for the construction component.
just leave the yours and maybe use. If you can hear.
I don't think that's actually online. I think that's just here.
Oh, it's just here.
Yeah. So my other question is, thank you for that clarification. I also saw there was one of the clarifying questions from another member was about what other intersections are included in 2139. And I noticed some of them were like Middlefield and Terabella, and those have been very recently done. So, and there was another one on there, which I can't see the list while doing this at the same time, but for 2139, there was a clarifying question. The two Middlefield ones have been recently done, that San Pierre and Terabella have been recently redone, like within the last year. So I wasn't sure why they were included in that list as other intersections to be done.
So the additional 9 intersections, those are included as the additional nine intersections, as we're adding additional treatments to those intersections. So enhancements to the crossings. What we received is we've identified these additional 9 intersections. Sorry, it's a little distracting with the
Those following along at home were as we tried to get the in-room working. For those following along, we're not saying anything while we were all muted.
We're gonna take a 5-minute break while we fix these technical difficulties. Thank you for your patience. Okay, before we get started, can those on the attendees list hear us?
That's not in this room.
Right, they're not in this room. Yes, all right.
Okay. We have everyone back in the room. Great. We will continue with where we left off, which was in the, thank you, which was on the committee questions regarding the capital improvement program. I believe Member Fenwick had just or was in the middle of asking a question, getting an answer. I think it would be best if you re-ask the questions so that we both captured and we all remember where we were.
Yes, great. And, yeah, so thank you. I thank you for the presentation. I was asking about item 2139, which is the grant sleeper item. It said additional treatments for some intersections. Two intersections I saw listed were West Middlefield at San Pierre and Terabella. Those are, I'm like, the paint's barely dry on them. Beautiful new intersection of ped crossings there. So I was wondering what additional treatments might be planned for those.
So we've identified a host of the 9 intersections that you had mentioned to reevaluate their treatment measures that we can include for enhanced pedestrian crossing safety. As you mentioned, those are already striped, so it's brand new striping, but striping isn't the only measures that we're looking to add. They also include, and not limited to, the rectangular rapid flashing beacons, and then striping and signage. Sometimes we can place reflectors at the intersection to really cause visibility to be, or better visibility for drivers to see the pedestrians at these crossings. So it's not just limited to striping, it's other measures that we can include, but we're evaluating each intersection to identify which are the best measures to include to be able to upgrade all the intersections.
Thank you.
That'll.
Would you like me to repeat my first question, which was on the Stevens Creek Trail extension, that it has that indeed been added?
So as a part of, so again, it's two-phase. There's the design component and then there's a construction component. So it's two different line items identified in the CIP. The design component is a design project active right now, but again, because of staff resources, it's been difficult to assign a project manager for this. We will be assigning a project manager this calendar year to start the design process, and we will be taking the construction project off the unscheduled list and putting it into the 5-year CIP.
Thank you for doing that again.
Okay, and those are all your clarifying questions.
Those were all of my clarifying questions at this time.
Do other members have further clarifying questions?
Yeah, did I see Rangsdorf complete on one of those slides?
Can we go back a slide? Maybe 2 slides. I don't remember.
Yeah.
So this is the feedback that we received from council at the study session on April 3rd. One of the items that was included or added new is adding Rangsdorf Green Complete Streets as a project.
So that's not in the handout we received because it is new.
Correct. We just heard that from council at the April 3rd study session. And so we haven't included the feedback that we received into your packets. It's, again, it's a process as we receive this input from the council committee and the Parks and Rec Commission. We'll be taking all that and then incorporating into the CIP program.
So my question, so your answer to Member Adamic's question, you have a high confidence. Does that high confidence include these new council additions? You still have high confidence?
So this is what we're doing with the balancing of the workload. We do have a high confidence to include these new projects, but we need to evaluate all the feedback that we received, including tonight and at the Parks and Rec Commission, to identify there's other priorities that are being asked so we can balance the workload.
These have been identified as the council priorities, so we will be including these, but if we receive other priorities, we have to balance that with other projects that are on the list, and we have to either defer them or unschedule them.
Would it be helpful if I said there's some projects on the existing list that maybe are a lower priority than the Rengstorff? Is that a feedback that would be helpful?
All feedback would be helpful, yes, and the ones that you consider priority and the ones that you consider lower priority. That helps us rank and prioritize the projects as we develop the program.
Thank you very much.
Member Martin.
Question is related to Stevens Creek Trail. The last couple of El Nino cycles have damaged the trail and closed it. I don't know if that's separate from capital improvements or contingency funds, given that we're moving into another El Nino cycle and that erosion is likely to be an ongoing problem, and the Stevens Creek Trail is the most utilized and important trail. How does that get handled in the capital improvement project, or does it?
So thank you for the question. We don't have a specific funding source we term those really emergency projects, something that comes up unforeseen. Through the CIP program, we don't have a CIP that's standalone creek repair, erosion repair project. It would come out of the operating funds just on an evaluation. But because of the season that we've had this year, we have seen some erosion along the Stevens Creek. And we are identifying or proposing to identify a new capital project just to do this, to evaluate the erosion and identify any repairs that are needed. So that's new, we're gonna be proposing with the capital improvement program this year because of the rains and the erosion that we've seen. But in the past, there really hasn't been a project or source of funds to be able to look to for these types of projects that could affect the tree.
Because from what I hear, we're heading into another El Nino cycle. Climate change is expecting more energy behind storms, as we experienced this winter. It's probably something we need to plan for.
More questions, or
That's the last question, thank you.
Member Don, was it?
Yes, I also had the same question as Member Stone about Rengstorff. I was wondering what the boundaries are for that suggestion, Rengstorff between what and what?
Which project are you referring to?
Sorry, the additional project, the Green.
Oh, the Green Complete Streets.
Robert Gonzalez, the principal civil engineer. So again, this was study session feedback. So I don't recall a council being specific about what specific segment of Rengstorff. They expressed interest in the avenue itself being studied as a Green Complete Streets. The first step in that is an evaluation process. So we are looking at that as a first step, and I believe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's El Camino all the way through to 101. So that part of the evaluation is to study the whole corridor, and then from there you can back away and identify specific projects.
Okay, and I saw somewhere, now I don't remember where, addressing pinch points or where the bike lane is very narrow, that happens between El Camino and Central. Is that independent of? How does that happen? I mean, it's not on this list. What is the way for it to happen?
You're speaking on Rengstorff Avenue?
Yes, Rengstorff.
So we haven't developed the scope for this Green Complete Streets yet, but we would expect that would be an evaluation that we would look at.
We received your feedback for the active transportation improvement funds that we discussed at the November feedback meeting, Brown and White Active Transportation Fund.
Okay.
And you'll see on the TAL that we are going to come back to the active transportation improvement fund, which allows us to do projects very quickly. And Robert Gonzalez can corroborate that he and I and Rhea have had significant conversations about addressing those pinch points in a faster manner than the CIP might be able to provide us. That type of thing is what the ATI funds is for. And we will work on the cost estimate and staffing gives us that ability.
And were those all your questions?
Yes.
Okay. And then realized I had a question about funding shortfalls in general. I saw there's a note in the memo about the list of projects, the funding required for the list of projects that currently exists exceeds the funding that is currently known to be available, is my impression. What is the magnitude of that shortfall, or are we anticipating that over the next couple years we'll be able to find grants and such to make up a lot of that shortfall? What are your thoughts on that?
Thank you for the question. So there's sort of two components to this. This is the near-term shortfall and the long-term shortfall. So on the near-term shortfall, it's really important for staff to be able to balance the first year CAP as well as the second year CAP. We need to have the amount of funding available for the projects that we're going to fund. So that's really our priority is year one. We based on the initial review of what was going to be rolling forward, we do have a shortfall. It's several $1 million just on year one. We are working now towards identifying how we can balance that. And sometimes we have to be creative, but some of those creative solutions sometimes require us looking at other projects and evaluating, again, is this prioritization? We prioritize one project over another, and then maybe it gets defunded or reduces fund, or it gets unscheduled, deferred, so that way we can identify the near-term projects. On a long-term basis, this is kind of years 3 through 5, we do have a significant shortfall due to major construction projects that we put placeholders for. Those are our major funding constraints and shortfalls. We are hopeful as we go through the years that we identify either a combination of grant funds, city funds, or other funding sources to help close the gap on those. But the year one and year two projects lists are the critical pieces for us to be sure that we're doing.
And so for that means for years 1 to 2 projects, closing those funding shortfalls likely means either prioritizing among the active transportation projects or prioritizing among the city's projects as a whole.
Correct, as a whole. Yeah, we looked at all the projects. And I spoke a little bit about the funding sources.
Yeah.
And it really is dependent on the source of funds for the project. So even though we might be able to unschedule one project, if the source of funds is different and it doesn't give us the ability to use those funds, it doesn't give us the benefit of unscheduling a project. It really needs to, the funding has to be matched up. And that's the hard work that staff has, this team works on to identify how we can fund it properly. Get the projects that are prioritized, scheduled, and incorporated.
Thank you. I think that covers BPAC clarifying questions. We will now move to public comment for item 6.1. We do not have any members of the public in the room. Do we have any members of the public online wishing to speak? If you do, you may raise your hand or press *9 if you're on the phone.
Chair, we currently do not have any hands up.
All right, then we will move on to committee comments for item 6.1. We have a question for feedback. At the end, I don't remember how open-ended it was. And so who would like to begin providing, I guess, do we anticipate any specific motion being helpful for staff, or is it going to be general comments about projects and priorities and that sort of thing?
Our request is if the committee has any specific comments related to the projects that we've identified. Again, these are the roll forwards projects that we've identified and recommend. We would appreciate to hear that feedback.
Okay. Who would like to begin? Member Stone.
Yes, I looked over all of the projects and understood them as best I could. And my feedback is that if there was one project that needed to be deprioritized among all those, I think it would be the Shoreline Boulevard ramp reconstruction, because I mean, they're all good projects, but a lot of them, like the Rengsdorf Complete Streets and other, have very significant safety improvements, and this one, I feel like the safety improvements are not as strong.
Could you clarify exactly which project you're referring to? There are multiple on Shoreline Boulevard.
All right, yes. Let me pull that up. I think I have it in my notes, actually. 2139. Did I write it wrong?
Grand Sleeper.
Am I,
That was Grand Sleeper.
do I have the wrong? No. Oh, so that, we're just talking about the roll forward. There was one about the ramp specifically.
So there's the 101 off ramp at
No,
Shoreline.
the Shoreline ramp over the Caltrain.
There's a Shoreline pathway.
Yes, down or
Okay, the pathway.
over, or over on
Yes.
which way?
This is the item that came before BPAC
Yes.
meetings ago.
Am I in?
It was related to ADA enhancements, building up the ramp to meet grade requirements.
I guess I was not present at that BPAC meeting.
Okay.
Are you talking? I'm sorry, I hope this is from a point of order, but Vice Chair Stone, are you talking about a pedestrian path you would like to deprioritize? Or are you talking, there is a project on here about a bus lane and utility improvements?
Not that one.
Multi-
Am I on the wrong? I may be on the
I
wrong.
think you're on the correct attachment. I'm just trying to make sure you're talking about the same project that the rest of us are.
And there's also Shoreline Boulevard, Highway 101, Bike Ped Bridge,
Yes, the bike.
there's, which is
Or no.
different than the bike path.
Okay,
There is a bike, would come from staff like to clarify what the projects along Shoreline are, so that we can make sure we are
I
speaking to
am,
the same thing.
I reviewed this Monday and I haven't had a chance to look at it yet.
Can you just give us, yeah, if you just give us a minute, oh, you give a number.
25XX is Shoreline Boulevard Path, Willow Street to Wright Avenue construction.
Which
grant-funded one.
is,
Page 9 of 13, second row.
Yes, it's 2137 bicycle pedestrian improvement, Shoreline Boulevard, Wright Avenue to.
can I clarify?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, it sounds like it's the Shoreline Boulevard pathway, page 9 of 13, table.
Page 6.
It's also on page 6, I think it's the same project.
Yes, well, there might be designing construction phase.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's the same one. You're correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
In both places.
Page 6 of.
Sorry.
Page 6 of 13, in the April 27th memo.
The one's talking about the design is complete, early 2024, and the other's talking about the $4.9 million construction.
My feeling is that there is an existing pedestrian path there that is maybe not the best. But because there are many other good projects on the list, like the Rengsdorf Complete Streets ones, feels like those maybe are more urgent, and if there is a trade-off there, that is a trade-off that I would make, but yeah. That's my only comment.
I can speak to that if
Yes.
the council wants. So thank you for the comment, I appreciate that. This particular project went through a significant part of the design process several years ago. I think it completed the design process around 2015, got a little bit more progress in 2018, and was paused because of a lack of construction funding. That particular project was submitted for a grant funding 2 years ago, year and a half ago, and we received funding for that project. So it's a little bit like, now that we received the funding, we saw the value back then, we want to finish the project.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
It was actually quite a while ago we applied for that, and then they came back to us because some money had been refunded, so we got it kind of second time around.
Okay, yes, I appreciate the context. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Additional comments from the VPAC?
Member Fennick here. I really appreciate this list. I know I often see, before I was on this committee, and I often hear sometimes in public comments like, you've been working on this for years, why isn't it done yet? And I appreciate these types of presentations and overviews because it helps me really see what goes into this. And even just that last example about how I remember walking with the consultants on that path. And that was a while ago, maybe 10 years ago. So this is, for myself, that path I walk all the time, and it is quite dangerous, and I do twist my ankle on it. And maybe for biking, it's okay, but I walk it, and it's not awesome. So I appreciate that one. So just as a counterpoint to Member Stone, and I know that funding's there, I think these are all look really great. I mean, I love all the new suggestions from council as well, but I appreciate that we have a lot that are already in design or you have moved through a lot of preliminary gates, and I really appreciate moving forward. I think I don't really see anything bad on here. You know, I always want more, but I also understand you don't have infinite resources. And so I really appreciate the work that's going here. I think I'm very happy with this list.
Thank you.
Member Atomic?
Yes, so I'm very excited about this list, and if the construction dates actually happen, super great. Even if they don't, I now realize I can never move away from Mountain View because I want to see all of this happen. As far as the additional suggestions, I know you don't want extra projects. I do think California and Rangsdorf are both very worthy, just because I think of them as being in the heart of the city. So those improvements, I think, would affect a lot of people. Aside from that, I liked the reasoning that Member Stone introduced, which is the safety per investment. And I realize different projects are at different stages, but taking that into account, making sure that things that were started get completed, or additional things, considering, because the dollar values attached to these vary a lot. And so if things have to go, then kind of considering less expensive projects that would be safety improvements maybe as a priority.
Yeah, I would like to echo two things. One is metrics, including safety as a worker user and ability to attract more active transportation should always be an assessment on our projects. The other is I expect fluidity and understand that it happens. And, you know, completion of large projects like the Ringstorf Caltrain overcrossing may change the view of how the importance of other work as the network shifts. So I think we should continue to be aware of it. The fact that the council has endorsed the Ringstorf project for consideration, I think dovetails with that, and as they move together jointly and separately, resequencing or looking at specific aspects is something I think we need to do. And you heard my earlier comments about contingency on Stevens Creek, which probably has one of the most high use levels and has the ability to probably attract even more users as it's lengthened.
I guess I'll give my comments then. I struggle with these lists because there's so much complexity and what makes sense to prioritize around, like, what has various levels of restriction and grant funding, what makes sense for staff time because you don't want to be jerking staff around between different projects. I am glad that the constraint on this list is funding and not we don't have enough people to do them. I think that is much more where I'd rather be. Because we can find ways to get funding, I think, more readily than we can magic people out of thin air. Among the projects, I think I do particularly like the suggestion to look at Rainsdorf Avenue. I could not come up with out of my head, a coherent prioritization of where in Rainsdorf Avenue to look at first, since I think it's all pretty bad currently. And I think the metrics you would use to determine where would require actually looking at the data and what I assume would be done in the initial studies. If I am looking to prioritize between these, I am roughly looking at what results in the greatest safety improvement to existing conditions. That does lead to me sort of struggling with projects like the shoreline bike path, or things like even the Stevens Creek Trail extension, where I have no idea how to think about that project in terms of prioritization, because it's a route that covers probably several hundred children per day getting to Mountain View High School. At the same time, the alternative route along Deer 6 Drive currently is relatively low stress compared to every other route to school on all the other schools. So I'm not sure, I do not know how I prioritize that one, especially since it's so much more expensive than, say, throwing down some posts to remove some parking. But they're all good projects. Anything I would do would just be sort of shuffling deck chairs on the Titanic in terms of trying to say exactly what we should do. And within those constraints, I would say defer to what we can get grants for, what sequences well. I am curious to see what we do going forwards with the active transportation improvements funds. I think the proposed projects list that we had presented to BPAC earlier, and which will come before BPAC at, I think, our next meeting, or a meeting coming up soon. I think those projects all look very good in terms of the return on investment for safety. So I think it'd be, if those work out well, it might make sense to try to get council to increase some of the funding we put into that bucket, if they are working out well. But I also don't want it to turn into a just money that no one's tracking cleanly, because and so council doesn't have an idea of what's going on. But if it's working well, then we should try to expand that. So yeah, I think that's my comments. Is there anything we needed to clarify among that? Any other comments that people had?
We got clear direction. We appreciate the support. I don't have any follow-up questions.
All right, thank you. In that case, we will move on to item 6.2, TDA Article 3 funding.
Thank you.
I assume we have that presentation.
It'll be me, and I'm bringing it now.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, I'm here to talk to you guys today about Transportation Development Act, Article 3 funds. So let's talk about the recommendation we're going to have here at the end of this presentation. We're going to present to you 3 options for the TDA 3 funding. 1, banking the funds. 2, putting these funds towards the Miramonte Avenue project, Avenue Improvement Project, or crossing improvements at Grant Sleeper and other intersections. The staff recommendation will be to use the TDA 3 funds for Miramonte Avenue. This received the most BPAC support at the November 2022 BPAC meeting, and it has a known budget shortfall that exceeds the available funding of TDA 3 funds. So what are TDA 3 funds? TDA 3 funds are an annual state grant that is administered by the Valley Transportation Authority, or VTA. They are dedicated to pedestrian and bicycle improvements. The funding comes from local Santa Clara County sales tax. So that means that those funds do vary annually. These funds can be banked for up to 5 years. So we have 1 more year of eligible banking. We choose to do that. And then once allocated, work must complete within 1 year. These are use it or lose it funds. So here we have a review of the previous year's funding. And you can see that we banked for 3 years. And then we applied the available funding to 2 projects, citywide crosswalk enhancements, village and shoreline intersection improvements. That brought our balance to 0. And now we have banked for the last 3 years, and our current balance is $346,497. And so we are presenting 4 projects here today. So first is the Miramonte improvements. This is a sidewalk gap closure, 2-way cycle track, the 2-way cycle track is from Hans to the school, Grant Elementary at Maryland and Castro. Fold outs, enhanced mid-block crossing at Hans, and that design is underway. And it does have a funding gap of $700,000. Next, we have Colony Street Trailhead. This is a project that produces a trailhead and a bridge to connect to the Permanente Creek Trail, Colony Street. There are no gates or bollards at that trailhead. And the project has been bid on. This has a funding gap of $500,000. Next possible project is a collection of different locations across the city. These locations would be for enhanced pedestrian crossings, meaning rapid rectangular flashing beacons, which is what you see here. The rectangular flashing beacons. Press a button, pedestrians walk and cars are supposed to stop. Flashing LEDs, largely the same as the rapid rectangular flashing beacons, except the LED lights up around the entirety of the sign. And then finally, pedestrian hybrid beacons, which are more akin to a stoplight, requiring cars to make a full complete stop as the pedestrian crosses, and it's push button. The design is underway on this project, but given the fact that the design is still underway, we don't know which of these treatments will be used at the given locations yet. We do not have a funding gap, a known funding gap. And you can see the locations here in the packet and on the slide. The other project is school striping project. So these are thermoplastic pavement markings. And so they can be used for high visibility crossings like you see here. And so these do require special skills to install. So we do this via a contract as you're melting the plastic into the pavement. And we'll do these near schools, including Latham Street, Safe Rest of School projects. They're thermoplastic pavement markings, as I mentioned. Design is still underway and a cost estimate is in development. It'd be all over the city locations. And you did mention the active transportation improvement funds. We did have a recommendation from the November meeting to look at green pavement markings, and we are considering the provision of those green pavement markings inside of this project. But we, as I said before, we're still waiting on a cost estimate and ability to produce that. So we have 4 options that are all existing and underway that would have an ability to possibly be completed in a timely manner as such as is required for the TA3 funds. So we have an option where you may bank the funds, and we have the option of the Miramonte Avenue Improvement Funds, and we had 3 BPAC members at the November meeting in vocal support, and none were opposed. The Colony Street Trailhead, we had no members in vocal support and no members opposed. For the crossings at Grand Sleeper and other locations, we had 2 members in support, no members opposed. And for venting striping improvements near schools, 2 members in support and no members opposed. So we are suggesting the 3 possible options: taking the funds, Miramonte Avenue Improvement Project, crossing improvements at Grant Sleeper and other intersections. And the staff recommendation is for Miramonte Avenue improvements. It has the most BPAC support, a known budget shortfall, and the timing will work out well for utilizing the project funds. If direction is given to bank funds. Next year, BPAC would review, prioritize, and recommend projects for the fiscal year cycle 24 to 25. If direction is given to allocate funds, staff will forward the BPAC's recommendation to the city council that needs to be done before June 30th of this year. And that is all I have, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Would anyone on the council commission like to ask clarifying questions? Member Fenwick.
I just had and I think you said it, and I didn't write it down fast enough. The Miramonte project, can you remind us the intersections that it goes from to?
Absolutely. It goes from Castro, Maryland, south all the way down to Cuesta.
Thank you.
Yes, could you remind me of a quick summary of any limitations on the TDA 3 types of uses? And, or its intent, and whether we expect to ever have a shortfall on projects that would qualify?
The intent of the funds is to help bicycle and pedestrian projects get completed in Santa Clara County. Those projects do need to be free of any encumbrances, ideally substantially through the design process so that construction can begin within a year of us allocating those funds. And clear of any potential issues that might slow it down, right away issues, things like that.
So
And your second, go ahead.
Well, I guess there was no more specific requirements other than bike and pedestrian.
It's pretty open as long as the project is fairly shovel ready.
And given that definition, I assume we are not going to run out of projects that might qualify or be desired.
That is likely.
Thank you.
Additional member Atomic.
So what does not getting the TDA 3 funding mean for each of the 3 candidates?
I
4? I thought one was banking. Or no, there's 4 in addition to banking the funds.
There's 4 projects that are in existing development, and one
Yeah.
option is also to bank. We are producing a suggestion of 3 options, which is the banking and the 2 projects
I
that
think
she's
that's,
referring to. If Robert is probably the best person to answer this question, what happens, Robert, if we do not provide funding to Miramonte Avenue improvements? And what happens if we do not provide funding to the crossing improvements at Grant Sleeper and other intersections?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I'll answer in general terms, and I'll kind of narrow it down. So Ed Arango, who was here earlier for the prior item, spoke about developing the CIP, and we talked a lot about shortfalls of funding. So if Miramonte were to go out to bid, because it's within a project budget now, but the bids came in higher, we would be short of that, and we would be looking for other sources of funding to move that project forward. So we're always looking for other project funding if the project budget is short of the expected costs of the budget. As costs escalate, it becomes more and more challenging to afford the projects that we've already got in the pipeline sometimes. So over the past couple of years, we've seen a lot of our bids come in higher than our budgets. So for example, Colony, which is on this list and is going to council in May, that came in, I think, $400,000 or $500,000 over budget. So very challenging. We identified a project source for that, which means, okay, we have the answer that we were looking for. But in the absence of those funds, that project doesn't move forward, and it gets on another list for perhaps grant funding or reallocating. For Miramonte specifically, we are planning on going out to bid by the end of this year. And if project funds are short of that project, we would be communicating to council to take funding out of reserve, for example, CIP reserve, which is one of those general categories that city engineer Arango spoke about earlier, where those funds are very competitive because we can serve multiple projects from that funding source, whether it's streets or sidewalks or transportation or traffic or building. A lot of projects will compete for those funding. So this is valuable because it is specific to pedestrian and bike improvements, and that we can identify the short amount of projects and do that. So Miramonte could be either scaled back or delayed. Grant Sleeper and the other intersections. We added the other intersections specifically because we were looking for an opportunity to combine projects, bring Grant Sleeper and deliver the 10 other intersections all at once as a single project. If somebody told me that I didn't have the budget that I needed, I would be looking at those intersections specifically and having to rank them in terms of a priority of not being able to fund some of those. So I would either be scaling back that project or going back to council to ask for additional funding. This, augments that. This provides a source of funding so that that's not the case.
So strategically, then if one wanted more funding for the projects combined, one could say we prefer the intersections, even if truly pretend we prefer the Miramonte, because we don't expect council to stop Miramonte, right? We could expect additional general funds there. And so if we pick the other one, we could potentially get both.
Asking to comment on strategy.
I want to add just a little bit of information.
Yeah.
Given that we have to go to council on the 30th of June, and we don't have a cost estimate for the crossing improvements, we need to be able to produce that project in a timely manner and have an idea of what those costs might be to fulfill our grant obligations. So please do keep that in mind as you're evaluating the various projects.
So sorry, the last thing you said means that it might not be suitable for TDA 3 because it's not actually ready.
It would be harder to get it ready.
So Grant Sleeper is earlier in the design process. Miramonte is very close to the end of the design process. So if somebody were to ask me which one is more ready or shovel ready, Miramonte is closer to that finish line, so I have more confidence in the costs. Grant Sleeper is just beginning the design process, and I would be apprehensive about making sure that in order to get to the end of the design process, now I'm on a timeline to deliver the project to ensure the TDA funding isn't at risk. With the Miramonte project, we're already there. We already know that way. And with Miramonte, we would have that answer sooner. So we can take that to council with a lot more confidence.
Yes, I have also some questions. They're all good projects. So it's a hard question. But I want to, so for Miramonte, I guess what's in my mind is we give them the 300,000, it's still $500,000 short, right? According to, there's a 700,000 gap identified. And for the Colony Street trailhead, it would be a larger percentage of the gap. And my question is that significant? Does the amount of the gap that the funds cover matter in terms of your ability to fund the project?
I would say that the issues that matter more than that would be the available funds from different sources. So for Colony Street, for example, that is both a pedestrian and bike improvement, and it's also a park improvement. You can identify a trail project that could also be different funding sources can be used for that project that are associated with trail maintenance or trail improvement. So that becomes more of a factor in terms of deliverability. So we can move different colors of money into that project easier than we can with the Miramonte project.
Very helpful.
So if I, just to confirm, since I think this is calling out stuff that is in the memo, but may not have been called out in the presentation. Am I correct in understanding the Colony Street project, you believe can, as you were alluding to, be covered with other sources of funding? It's not the TDA Article 3, and that's why that's not on this list of 3?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, and the augmenting striping improvements, the memo says the project is now fully funded.
So because of the feedback we received at the active transportation improvements preview in November, Robert and I have discussed the inclusion of those green pavement markings that was a suggestion provided by the BPAC. And we have to add that into that project, or the plan is to add that into the project, which will change the cost estimate. So we do not know the differential at this time based on that. However, we do anticipate it to be small, and we have discussed the use of active transportation improvement funds, as that is basically the definition of what those funds are for. Small improvements, say, augment a project or keep that. So that is our thought process for not having that as one of the 3 options.
Thank you. And regarding as Member Stone alluded to, the fact that the 350,000 would cover half of that $700,000 shortfall. Is that $700,000 shortfall you will need to find the additional 350,000, or is that that's going out to bid later, and so you aren't sure exactly how big the $700,000 shortfall will be, but that's your current target, and so we're just trying to close as much of the gap as we can?
The Miramonte Avenue Improvements Project is started as primarily a pavement rehabilitation project, and we saw this as an opportunity to improve transportation and safety for bikes and peds. So the shortfall any potential shortfall as we get closer to the end of design may come from the striping, it may come from the signal improvements, but it also may come from the paving costs, which would not be eligible for TDA 3 funding. So it's a little bit of a crystal ball to try to understand where that cost escalation might come from by the end of the year. It'll help having the TDA 3 funding available because we have that two-way bike cycle track, which can be an expensive element. But it's difficult to answer your question because I have all of those elements that are, some of them are appropriate for this funding source and some of them would not be.
Okay. And so if the project is short on some part that's not eligible for TDA 3 as the year progresses, then we would look to, for instance, to the CIP reserves as such to cover that.
Yeah.
Or look for, if there's other funding you can find, great, but.
Correct. It would be my job to identify another funding source, either in the active projects or in future projects that I would have to move forward. So for example, if I had funding for a planned future paving project, I would have to recommend moving that funding forward, or using unallocated CIP reserves.
Is that all for clarifying questions? All right, with that, we will move to public comment. I see no members of the public in person. Is there anyone on Zoom who would like to raise their hand and make a public comment on item 6.2?
Chair, I see no hands up.
All right, then we will close public comment and we will move to the committee comments and or motions. I assume that we would like an explicit motion indicating our recommendation.
Yes.
Okay. Then let us make our comments and then someone can make a motion. Would anyone like to begin?
Yes, so I think, first of all, I'm really grateful that staff came to us both in November and now with options. because having just banking as an option seems very uncreative when we know there's so much to do here. But understanding that they have to be shovel-ready. And that's why I think often we've either banked in the past because we didn't have sufficient shovel-ready projects, or we knew there was a big project coming up. I know we banked for a while preparing for the Shoreline Villa intersection, for example, where we knew that money was needed. So for my own self, I'm really glad to see the options. I really like seeing the breakdown and the work that's happening here. And I am really in favor of Miramonte Avenue, both mostly because of its proximity to schools and the improvements that will be there. I think there's a lot of room for bike ped improvements in Miramonte Avenue, and this is a huge step forward. And I think that would be a really great project.
I guess I can make some comments then. I generally echo Member Fenwick's comments. I will admit I had the same thought as Member Adamic did about strategic suggestions, but I think it behooves us to be clear about what our priorities are, so that council can decide what tricks they want to play with funding, rather than muddying the waters. And yeah, I think the Miramonte Avenue improvements would be a very good way to use this funding. I do feel a bit awkward since it almost feels like a more normal CIP project that should have gone through some other process, but the fact that it's in addition to a normal paving program makes me willing to say, yeah, this it goes out. We're making something happen faster on a safe route to school than we could have through the normal CIP. So it makes sense to use this sort of funding for that.
I would, Member Fenwick here, I'd like to move that we put our current TDA funding to the Miramonte Avenue Improvements Project.
I'll second that motion.
Then let us vote on that motion. All in favor of the motion to allocate TDA 3 funding to Miramonte Avenue improvements?
Aye.
Aye. The motion is unanimous and passes. All right, we will now move to item 6.3, the BPAC fiscal year 22 to 23 work plan, where we will review the 22 to 23 work plan.
And I will present that. And bring up the fiscal year 22 to 23 work plan. This is our current work plan. And so in our normal process, I've highlighted the things that have changed, and we'll talk about them, and then be happy to answer any questions that you guys might have after this and the tentative agenda list. So we have our TDA 3 call for projects, which was, we just did that now. The annual capital improvement program development and approval process, just did now. The El Monte corridor study review, which we did on the 26th yesterday. And finally, we had the required annual joint meeting with Los Alsos, discuss Safe Routes to School, which we did on the 26th yesterday. We did have the Earth Day bike ride and tabling to put out information about active transportation and better transportation and sustainable transportation that occurred on Saturday the 22nd. The annual spring parade is no longer happening, that's been canceled. And that is all the changes to the work plan, and now I will move to the TAL. So the TAL, you see here, this was our special meeting that we're having right now. And then we have the meeting in June, which will have the active transportation plan, Evelyn realignment and transit center update, talk about speed limits to AB 43. And the other things that have moved is the active transportation improvement funding, which was going to be in the June meeting. Staffing is coming online now, and so we will be able to have cost estimates, which is necessary for you guys to give us direction on how to use those ATI funds. And then the collision data review, the our crime data analyst has not been hired yet. They are in the hiring process. And so when he or she is on staff, we will bring back the collision data. And that is all I have for our current 22-23 work plan and tentative agenda list.
Thank you, Brandon. Are there any questions regarding the 22 to 23 work plan and TAL? Member Dominic?
Would it be appropriate to discuss here the format of the VTA VPAC update? I would like to do so, but I don't know if this is the right item.
I don't know,
Will it be
Rhea,
for next year?
Transportation Manager Rhea.
Do we, I'm Rhea.
Hi, Rhea.
Transportation. Do we have the VTA update on this agenda?
We do have it at 6.5, but I think you mean generally speaking, not,
Generally speaking.
yeah.
What's the question exactly?
I would like to know if I could do a written update that would be included in the materials as opposed to just speaking.
How about we discuss this as part of the draft 23 to 24 work
Okay, fine.
plan? Not to disrupt the discussion, but.
Yeah, that's fine, but I think that you could also do that in your update. I think that that's,
We can discuss that in the update.
like, I think, no, in the VTA BPAC, if it's about VTA BPAC,
Yes.
that could be written if you wanted to. I mean, normally it's a verbal, but if you want to do a
Okay.
memo, we could do that as well.
If you get it to me a week in advance, we can include it in the packet.
But that, I guess that should be, we should discuss this in that item.
Yes, we can, is all we're saying, not that we
Okay,
would
great,
or
great.
should. That's for you.
Great. Well, that's also for the member giving us the VTA BPAC. Anyways, okay. Member Finwick, I saw you had a question.
Not on this work plan.
Okay, on the next year's work plan.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for the reminder.
Any additional questions for the work plan that goes through our next meeting in June? All right, seeing none. Any members of the public wishing to provide public comment?
I have no hands up from the public.
All right. In that case, we'll move on to committee comments on this item. I assume that there is no specific feedback or motion seeked regarding this from staff. Okay. Any comments on this work plan?
I just have a small comment. I just appreciate the updates, and I kind of just was feeling a bit sentimental and retrospective recently, and just thinking, you know, it would be kind of nice to sometimes maybe have a look back on what we had done, and this kind of captures what we have done for the year, and so that's pretty neat. Thank you. That's it, just thanks.
Any other comments on this? All right, in that case, we'll move to item, sorry, was there something?
No.
Okay. In that case, we'll move to item 6.4, the draft fiscal year 23 to 24 work plan.
That appears to have accidentally been closed by me during all of this commotion, so let me bring it up. All right, and is our draft work plan? We have here our first item, which is TDA 3, and no substantial changes in our current process for TDA 3 review. Here we have input on various plans, and you'll see here, of course, as required and requested remains. We also have the active transportation plan, which we provided in the fall of 23 and the spring of 24. The local road safety plan coming in August of 23. The transportation demand management ordinance coming in the winter of 23. We'll maintain our ongoing review of bicycle pedestrian facilities improvements, and we will also have to be decided AB 43 implementation discussion in the coming work plan, or we presenting this for your consideration. The annual CIP, March 2023. That's a typo. That should be March of 2024. So that'll be a change that I'll need to make. That's last month. Anytime we have a private development can be directed by city council to provide it to you for review. And then here we have projects for potential review. Grant Sleeper and other crossings coming in fall of 2023. And then you can see here in the future, various projects in summer of 24, Castro, El Camino Protected Intersection, El Camino and Escuela intersection project, Middlefield and Moffett bikeway projects, Shoreline 101 Bridge, and then the Stevens Creek Trail extension for the fall of 24. Of course, we'll continue our ongoing efforts to promote bicycle and pedestrian safety, coordinate with their other jurisdictions, including the VTA, so that we can discuss VTA issues, and explore a joint committee meeting with another community, neighboring community. We just did Los Altos, so Los Altos and Sunnyvale. Pursue coordination activities as identified, of course. Review the police data, and we have this on a quarterly basis as we currently have it now. Collect crash, collision, theft data. We'll review the Safe Routes to School program coming in fall 23. Continue to attend CNC neighborhood meetings, farmers market on an ongoing basis. We can always review participation in that. Monthly bike rides, bike and e-bike rides, Thursday. And then the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition 2023 Summit is also going to be, so I've got a typo in the opposite direction here. That should be August 23 because it's actually going to be here in Mountain View, which is great. Annual review of the active transportation plan. We'll get back to that once it's improved. And then develop the active transportation plan, which I talked about before, we're currently doing, and then finalize the local road in August 23. And of course, the TDM, as I mentioned before, spring of 24. And now I will shift over to the TAO. And we see collisions, report, local road safety plan, active transportation improvement funding. So about that. Collision data review, active transportation plan again. Grant Sleeper, pavement management program has been that will be a regular item now. Vision Zero active transportation outreach, active transportation improvement funding. This is our review again, as an annual review now in November. Collision data review, and this is the January meeting, so election of new chair, vice chair. We're looking at the joint meeting being in February of 24. Again, back to the active transportation plan, a regular annual CIP review, and TDA 3 Article 3 funding. And then our final collision data review, draft work plan, and then a Safe Routes to School in June as the school year ends. And then we have our items to be scheduled, well talked about on the previous work plan. And so that is all I have, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
I believe you had a question about this one.
Questions, thank you. I have comments too, but I also have questions. Has the spring parade been permanently canceled, or might we hope to see that next year?
I'm not 100% sure. I think we should, if you would like, we can ask the Parks Department and get back to you.
That would be great. And we have sometimes in the past, looking at the TAO, maybe this won't fit. Are we considering doing any joint meetings with any other Mountain View committees or commissions?
We did not include that in the work plan, and so that's obviously not been considered, but we are not opposed to doing that.
Those are my questions.
So I had questions about the transportation demand management ordinance. I saw it's coming up or back for a future meeting. I guess the question would be a little bit on coordination with other committees, as we saw examples of, I think at yesterday's meeting on the Safe Routes to Schools, there is attempts to establish a coordinating committee. Is there any parallels with transportation demand management? And if so, active transportation seems like it should be perhaps part of that committee. Or at least-
Can you repeat your question?
So for Safe Routes to Schools, for instance, you're addressing it as a kind of a multifunctional approach with a committee of various organizations, both within the city entity and externally. The transportation demand management seems somewhat similar, affecting both multiple internal organizations and external organizations. I guess, given that it's going to be an ordinance and that may be in place for a while and need implementation, are there any parallels in how it will be evolved and then implemented that could benefit from our participation as one aspect, stakeholder in transportation?
Okay, thank you for the question. So, I guess Ben is not on the call at the moment. The TDM ordinance, we've hired a consultant, and part of what they will be doing as they put this together is doing outreach and establishing, and also having focus groups with particular groups. We have a number of entities that we plan to engage. Some of them are the business community, Chamber of Commerce, members of the Transportation Management Association, and so I think that there are those relationships as well, like a technical advisory committee for that process. It's different from what we have for Safe Routes to School.
Okay. I guess I would like to volunteer, given my prior expertise and involvement in some TDM initiatives at various employers, and knowledge about kind of where they work, where they don't work, and how people exploit loopholes.
Great,
So if that's available for open public participation or for a member of the BPAC, that might be something of interest to me.
Additional questions regarding this? Member Doc.
Is this the right item to ask about collision data review frequency?
I think this is a very appropriate item to talk about.
Yes.
It is, okay. And is this the right item to ask about contents of staff report or requests for, or no?
It could be, depending on the specifics of the question.
Seems reasonable to me, since it is sort of, I'm not sure it's on our work plan, but it's part of regular meetings.
Many of the things are reporting items that we address via the staff report as our ongoing commitment to the work.
Additional questions? All right. In that case, we'll move to public comment for this item. Is there public comment for this item?
There is. Let me process that. Bruce England, I'm going to click to allow you to talk. Please unmute yourself and you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Brandon. I had to say something because we haven't had public comment on any of the other things, although I did provide earlier public comment on the audio. So I do have some comments on the work plan development. I think I've got 6, but they're fast. So I don't know whether this is on B or M or another item, but on the active transportation plan work, it somehow can be captured that there is coordination with other plans being developed and not all in public work. So the biodiversity strategy and urban forest plan, for example, dark sky lighting policy, which might wind up being really important because people have varying thoughts and opinions on how that should be handled. I don't know how to capture that in here, Brandon, but you know, if it could be just so you're noting it during the course of the fiscal year. And then on C, under AB 43 implementation, there are a lot of questions about how that works. And it came up last night in sort of background chat around the speed limit on El Monte. Like, do we have to have a speed study? And you actually heard that during the meeting. Some clarification on how AB 43 works during the course of talking about implementation on item C, I think would be useful for BPAC members and for the public in general. On line item H, tell me, Brandon, if I'm going too fast. On H, I want to suggest that a joint meeting, that this is the right line item, right? Where do you have the joint meetings? Yeah, conducting a joint meeting with other cities. I want to suggest a joint meeting with Los Gatos. And I know they're not an adjoining community, but the current mayor is very supportive of bike infrastructure, and a lot has been done there in Los Gatos. That's Maria Risto. Her term as mayor will end this year. And so trying to do that this year, if possible, would be great. So anyway, just in general, would like to suggest Los Gatos so you can learn and discuss with them how they developed their infrastructure, how they made it work where it worked there. On entry K, I didn't see Bike to Wherever Day, and I wonder if that should be in there because there's Bike Month, I think, Bike Summit, SCBC Bike Summit, but not Bike to Wherever Day. And yet people in BPAC and staff do participate in that. It might be worth including there. And that's it. I already mentioned the active transportation plan. Thanks.
Thank you. And I believe we have no further public comment. So we will move to committee comments. And this would be an appropriate, if you want to poll the committee as to how we feel about VTA updates, this would be an appropriate location to do so, I think.
Oh, for that too?
If you would like. You can also do it under the VTA item. I think it's in order in both.
Okay. Yeah, so for VTA, I'm not like verbally very effective. So, and oftentimes there are links like action items or like even just linking to the agenda, I think would be helpful because then you just have it there. But then also I can point out like, well, for this item, this presentation was especially useful, or this interactive map was especially useful. And so I could keep it like very factual, neutral, and then keep like, you know, more opinion comments to to the verbal, or I don't know. Yeah, but in any case, I think it would, both when I was hearing the verbal comments before I was the VTA VPAC rep, and now even listening to myself, I don't get that much out of it. So I'm hoping that having the written would be okay. So I'm just looking for your feedback.
Yeah, it sounds like it's perfectly fine with staff, and I certainly don't think we can forbid it, and I think that'd be actually more helpful for us to have it written. I'm guessing most people would agree.
Lines with my preferences as well.
Yeah, I would love that, particularly because sometimes there's some interesting presentations that have graphics. It's very difficult to describe in words. I would almost go one step further. Not to get more work for you, but also when I look at our general shape of our agenda, the VTA update, I find is more interesting for the general public than our work plan review, but it always comes after. And when I was a member of the public coming to BPAC meetings, when you all get that work plan out, woo, out the room I went. So I think there's tends to be more, because the work plan is more how we work. And there's sometimes we do get public comment. Thank you today, but but some of the stuff I hear from our VTA updates, both from Mata and our prior representatives, are very interesting to our constituents. I would think, but I don't think they stick around for it. So, wants to give you more work.
Yeah. The one other thing I would suggest say is that I don't think there's any issue with you editorializing in advancement. If you want to keep it neutral, to keep it good for public consumption, to be comfortable with public consumption, or having what's written down be reasonably neutral, great. But I don't think there's any prohibition against offering comments as long as it's not your you're initiating discussion with the rest of the, if you're, not as long as you're interplay discussion with the rest of the BPAC prior to the meeting. If you're just writing down your thoughts, that's written down. I believe.
Even if they're provocative.
Yes. Okay, I think that's right. I think you had other comments as well and other things to discuss as well. Beyond BPA.
Sure, yeah, I just wanted to raise the question of the frequency of the collision report. I guess due to staffing shortage right now, we have a little bit of a jam. But I also wonder whether in general we could do semi-annually. Yes.
I know Member Adamic knows I have some strong feelings on this. I feel it is our committee's connection to the Mountain View Police Department. It's really, unless there's been something horrific that's happened, generally the only time they come to our meetings and gives us a chance and our public to hear directly from them about things that are happening. I know I could go any day of the week, pull up their report, but I don't. And when it's an agenda item, I like to look in advance, and so then I have some questions, or maybe not, but it does kind of keep me in touch with, as a member, of what's happening there. And also I think there is a little, I know we don't have the staffing member there now, but I think from talking to prior people in the MVPD, knowing they're coming to present, they also make sure everything's ready on the website. So it's, for me, I find it very symbiotic, and unless something horrible has happened, they tend to be about a 5 or 10 minute update once a quarter. For me, I think helps me keep in touch with what's happening from the police department.
Thoughts on that? I'm sensitive to the fact that we have, in fact, they have been functionally closer to semi-annual than quarterly recently, and I want to be careful about our meeting times, but I'm inclined to, as long as we can move through them in a timely manner normally, I'm fine keeping them quarterly myself. And it's something that I want to be careful about not losing out, although I do feel that currently it's a bit, there's very little conversation typically beyond sometimes some questions about the data integrity, which fair, but it is not much of a dialogue necessarily about how police enforcement works. I would say if we want to more explicitly have conversations about how police enforcement interfaces with bicycle and pedestrian safety, or with bicycles and pedestrians and theft and such, we should aim to have that as explicit agenda items rather than just as, or something that's like once a year, like the pavement management plan, rather than as trying to sort of assume that we will inherently cover that in a quarterly collision data review. And if we were to set some sort of annual thing like that, then I think it'd be totally reasonable to us also have the collision data review, but say have it semi-annual if we were explicitly doing some sort of regular general PD interaction. Because currently whenever we're on those items, I feel like it's just we're just covering the collision data review and the theft data, and doesn't feel like an opportunity to talk about, say, oh, how are we approaching enforcement of cars parked in the bike lane? How is the PD approaching and treating students who are going around riding without helmets or rolling through stop lines or such? There's no place in our current work plan where we really talk about that, and so I'm not sure the current cadence is helping with that.
Other thoughts?
Remember, Dominic, if you had more thoughts.
Just how would we go about this idea of an annual, like, broader interaction with?
Well, I was actually going to say, since I believe this member from the brought up interfacing with other city bodies, I've been sort of actually curious to try to set up a joint meeting with the Public Safety Advisory Board, since they are that are supposed to help with the interface between the public and the police department. And it would seem logical as part of things like Vision Zero to be talking about enforcement. And so I had just been thinking about it in terms of should we have a joint meeting sometimes in the next year, not in terms of, oh, maybe we should try to set up some sort of annual thing, where maybe just between us and PD and not necessarily a joint meeting. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll add 2 comments. So one, I'd like more data and maintain the frequency. I don't need them to come and present it if the data is clear and timely. More data about traffic stops or citations issued, involving bicyclists or pedestrians in locations would be interesting. And I don't know if that's available in any format or not publicly, but that's what I would like. So that can all be done. I don't really need them to be here with frequency to do that, as long as we know what that process is. What I would like is true dialogue, not even with the commission perhaps, but with interested command staff or whatever in the police department that does really want to take input and respond to it. I don't know if that's feasible or likely, but true dialogue that to me would be most beneficial rather than just a one-way presentation with no deviation or discussion.
Member Fennick, I know I already spoke on this specific item, but I see that a more robust connection with either the public safety PSA advisory body, or something where we can have more discussions on particularly like updated ordinances. I think that's something on one of the council work plans and things as well. So that all sounds very interesting. I still really like the connection point with the police. What I'm hearing is more would be nice, more dialogue would be nice, more of a meaty agenda item would be nice. But I think I've appreciated it, at least having recognized the officers, and it's nicer when they come here in person, which maybe they will be doing in the future, but because then you get to actually see them walking around and people.
I guess since I know changes to the work plan that have to go through a process, I'm going to make a motion to add a meeting sometime in the 2023 to 2024 work plan, a joint meeting with the Public Safety Advisory Board, reaching out to that board and its staff to see if they're willing, and if that is not feasible, to see about getting a meeting scheduled sometime in the next year for a discussion between BPAC and PD about traffic enforcement related to, or presentation or some sort of item, probably akin to the pavement management plan item, discussing that. Yes, clarification on that.
Yes, please. Is this usually our joint meetings with other communities is a replacement of one of our existing meetings? Is that what you have in mind, or for the joint meeting with a different local Mountain View Commission, or would it be an additional meeting?
Given the amount of stuff we have on our agenda, I'm guessing this would correspond to an additional meeting out of practicality. I'm not sure that I would want it to replace the joint meeting with another local community. It certainly could, but I don't know how people feel about adding another meeting to the calendar. That's also something that goes into the consideration of how difficult it is to the work plan.
And the alternative is, it would just, if that doesn't work, then to attempt to have it just be us.
Just the us and sort of PD as an item where PD maybe gives a presentation about sort of how they approach enforcement related to bicycle and pedestrian safety, and then give a chance for us to ask questions about that and provide our thoughts and comments on that. Potentially as sort of under the scope of the Vision Zero plan, but also potentially just as its own item.
I have a point of order question. I think this is the time if we want to make suggested changes to our work plan. Is that correct? Because this has not this is draft, not approved. So this is the time to make those suggestions. So I think just as a point of order, I think this is the right time.
Yes, yes. So I don't know if I need a formal motion or not, but I was, made one and then there's no second, so I don't know what to.
Yeah, I'll second.
So actually, are we requesting an additional meeting or not?
I don't know if an additional meeting is necessary to accommodate the request.
I'll make a motion that we do not have an additional meeting.
Okay, so in terms of the motion, shall I say what I have written down here?
Please.
The PD requests a joint meeting with the Public Safety Advisory Board and/or PD presentation on enforcement as it relates to bicycle and pedestrian safety. And I guess the friendly amendment is a joint meeting to replace one of the scheduled meetings.
Just looking at the calendar and seeing what I would think about if that bumped anything. I'm happy to try to accommodate the not adding additional meetings. Yeah, planning to replace an additional meeting, and if that significantly impacts our agenda for the next year, I would want to understand that better before committing to that.
Is there a charter for the Public Safety Advisory Board, and understand, you get an idea how much overlap there is?
They have their own work plan. I don't believe traffic enforcement is specifically on it currently.
Is there interest in them in traffic enforcement?
I know that at least one or two of the members of that board are interested in it. I think I tried to email the chair at some point and didn't get a response, so I don't know if the current chair is interested, but and I recall a council member saying that they were hoping for more joint meetings across city bodies, but.
Member Fennick here, I like the idea of doing a joint meeting with PSAB, and perhaps we could have MVPD presence there as well. I would vote for it to replace our joint meeting with another local community. Just from a staff and all of that.
I'd be comfortable with that, since I don't see a particular need for any of the neighboring cities, but it's sort of we do it once a year, so then if you skip 1 year, it just sort of adds yet more time. But I also I would care more about having a joint meeting with the Public Safety Advisory Board than with any of the adjoining cities right now. So I think I would be comfortable with the amendment being, if the joint meeting is feasible, have it replace the joint meeting with the local community.
I'll comment, I haven't heard enough discussion to convince me that it would improve bicycle safety or the number of people biking and walking at this point.
I don't know if it would, but I have not had any dialogue I have not heard any dialogue on enforcement in my now over 2 years on this body, so I just don't, it's the lack of discussion, especially if we're also receiving the collision reports regularly.
This is Member Fennick, maybe as a, I mean, ironically, in our quest to save time, we've spent a long time discussing a relatively traditionally very short item. It's been long the last couple of times because we were discussing whether or not to have it or not, but it is generally a very short item. I think maybe what we're really looking for is also additional information on bicycle related citations, such as parking in the bike lanes, other information if available. It looks, so we can learn more about how that works. That's what I was hearing from Member Barton.
I think that would address some of my concerns just by broadening the scope of that. I am not sure how much it would break open any sort of dialogue on that beyond just adding to the data we receive.
Member Fennick here, in the past, when the police have brought something, the police department have brought something that was confusing or perplexing, we've had dialogue. For example, we did get, there was on a prior VPAC that led to the whole redoing of an ordinance for children being cited for riding the wrong way on bicycle going to school. That brought, that was from one of the updates from NVPD, and it resulted in angry parents. I don't know how yellow dog, but there, I think it could open up for dialogue, and I believe the police department's always open for answering any questions we have on the data or anything else we've heard about as well.
You have a motion that has been seconded, so
Yes,
if you
we
want to
do.
withdraw or before we go.
Maybe what I want. I would, I still want to at least understand if the Public Safety Advisory Board is interested in having a dialogue, so I'd like to advance the motion. Would be willing to pare down things eventually to just adding more to our data requests. But I sort of want to be explicit about our intents as well, and I am curious what a joint meeting would look like.
So that your motion is to have a joint meeting with the PSAP.
Yes, and if that is not feasible, then to basically downscale that to a meeting with a sort of a presentation from PD with that's a bit more explicitly open-ended than the collision data review we've had.
But just to once.
That one would be just once in the year on the basis that it might be longer and not limited to just what the citations have been in the last quarter.
That's
Still the
separate,
same.
but separate from removing.
This, I am not saying as part of this reduce or remove collision data review reports. It's possible this such a new agenda item like this would include a collision data review report at the start of it.
This still sounds the same to what I seconded.
I think it is. And the idea is this would, I guess, not add another meeting to the calendar.
Chair, would you like us to read back the motion?
Sure.
BPAC requests a joint meeting with Public Safety Advisory Committee to replace a scheduled meeting. And if that is not feasible, to receive a more open-ended annual presentation from PD on enforcement as it relates to bicycle and pedestrian safety.
I think that reflects my intention. All right. Can we have a vote on that then? All right. All in favor? All right. 2 in favor. All opposed? 2 opposed. All abstaining. Okay. So 2 and 1. The motion fails. We can.
Yeah.
Can I just add something? So we can talk to the police and see if this is something they'd be willing to do.
I would be.
Anyway, I don't know
curious.
what the staff workload implications are.
Okay.
So maybe we can.
Yeah, and at a minimum, it would be, I suspect we will ask for more collision data, or not collision data, more PD-related data.
With a not passing motion, though, we have indication from the bank that they do not want us to do what you just suggested.
Well, so I guess my comment was that maybe our PD collision data, like, you know, maybe this is something that was intended, I'm not sure.
What's the concern about adding an extra, replacing a full meeting with a joint meeting with PSAB? Or was the concern about the rest of that?
Member Fennick here. My concern is I was thinking maybe some of us should go attend a PSAB meeting as a member of the public and learn a little bit more about what they do. Maybe a chair-to-chair conversation, and then maybe something could come out of that, but I feel like there's too many unknowns.
I know they are in the middle of.
I would second that. I heard just curiosity, and I don't think curiosity is enough of an agenda item. So I think you should go to a meeting, come back and report to us what their mission and interest level is. And whether we have overlap in terms of increasing bicycle safety and active transportation participation. And if there is, then I might be interested, but curiosity is not enough for me.
As I said earlier, I had not yet reached the PSAB chair, and I know they're picking a new chair and vice chair shortly. I don't think that got counted. Anyways, with that, is there anything else we wanted to discuss on the draft work plan? Since I think we spent a fair bit of time on one topic.
Member Fenwick.
I had a couple of items. I wanted to, I don't know if it would require a motion or not, but I would like to see Bike to Wherever Day added to K. Is that something that would require a motion or is kind of fits under the general?
Suppose it would, yeah.
I think it's, can we go back to the work plan?
You're on the tab.
I mean, if we were going to do a motion for addition, adding another one.
Can you go up to the top here? What's at the top of the page? Key milestones, I see. So, and then go down to K again.
Yes.
I would like to move that we include Bike to Wherever Day with our outreach activities under K in our work plan.
I will second that.
Would you like to take a vote?
There's no other comments on that motion. I will second, I'll take a vote on the motion to add Bike to Wherever Day to item K. All in favor?
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously with Fenwick making the motion and Kuzma seconding. Okay, sounded like there were more comments.
Yes, could we, and maybe this could have been a question, pardon, also on K, if there could occasionally be the bike rides, if schedule allows from staff, I'll just make this as a comment, to do them on a Sunday, if ever possible.
Are you asking staff?
I guess I'm just making it as a comment that sometimes to do it on a Sunday would be nice.
Did you have a particular audience or objective in mind for the bike ride?
Me, I have conflicts often on Saturdays and I miss the bike ride, but it's very selfish, but I know everybody has a variety of schedules, so sometimes a Sunday bike ride may allow others to participate.
Can you comment on the particular category you're representing, whether it's BPAC members or?
I'm representing as someone who likes to go on these bike rides and learn about what's happening in the city. Because everyone I've gone on has been amazing.
If I can just make a comment, so I think that these items in K, and this is kind of going back pre-COVID, so these were things where the BPAC members would come and like table at these things. It hasn't really been working that way lately because we haven't had tables. Actually, and on that item, actually CNC, we have a CNC on the 18th of May, and I believe this is our first in-person CNC meeting. So if somebody from BPAC wants to come and table there, that'd be great. And so in terms of the bike rides, what this item is about is like the BPAC members are available to participate in them.
So you're saying we signed ourselves up to host a Bike to Wherever Day?
Consider the table.
Just for the point of order, that this is monthly, so no motion's necessary in order to set it Sunday or Saturday, because it just put it as monthly. So the comment has been received.
Okay, great. And then my other comment was, the rest of them have been, the other thing I think this is kind of captured with the AB 43 update, but I would love to see a regular item, and maybe this is just in staff updates on what's happening legislatively. That's because for myself as a layperson, I often get lost in all the AB this and measure that. And sometimes I know like Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition has sometimes asked for individual members of the BPAC to sign like a letter to send to legislature, but as a BPAC ourselves, I don't think we've ever taken legislative action since I've been involved with the committee, but just general legislative updates would be really useful.
Yeah, I think now that we have retained consultants or have a policy of advocating on certain measures, we probably have access to more information.
In the city manager's office, but if you want to add it, if you want to do a motion on this one, I think because I don't understand the ongoing staffing, workload implications of it.
So this may be as what we often have listed here as like an as needed or not ongoing, but I would love to add a work item for getting legislative updates from staff and how BPAC can be effective, either that information or taking action.
And this, I know in some of the, like, the staff update items, you've sometimes provided updates on state bills. I think that's usually been after they've passed, which may be what Member Fenwick is speaking to, but was that just sort of a ad hoc thing that staff was doing to?
So I would like to see that on the work plan, both after they've passed to help understand them, but also when things are in motion where maybe as our members of public or ourselves, members of BPAC, could, help influence those decisions by writing to our representatives. So knowing when there's something in progress is helpful, because some of those bills die very quickly because people write in opposition for things that they don't like bikes.
I have a question on.
If it's related, because I think.
I have a motion on the floor.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm sorry, you made a motion for that.
I have made a motion to add a work item to receive legislative updates for both in progress legislative things, items related to bicycle and pedestrian new laws across the state, and then new legislature that has passed. And I have that, it's not as this, I forget how you have this listed, but it's as needed.
We'll have to find a home. If the motion passes, we'll find out.
My question is that if we are getting informed of some new state law, like AB 43 is being discussed, and that comes before the BPAC, is a thing would it be possible for the BPAC to endorse a bill? Is that a thing that can happen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, nothing precludes us from doing it, so we can.
And Vice Chair Stone, that is my motivation for wanting to know about when stuff is in the pipeline versus finding up, and I'll hear about it when it's died, and I go, that would have been really awesome.
I'm going to second that motion that you made, just to keep us in order.
Can I comment on
Yes.
that though? I mean, Ria's presentations were wonderful, but given that we have so much going on and that this is like generic California level stuff, I just don't know. There's many other sources to get it from, and there's more like local Mountain View things that we could be learning about. So I love them, but given how much other stuff there is, I'm not sure about the best use of time.
And just as a counter, I just really what Vice Chair Stone was saying, it gives us an opportunity to endorse and put weight behind bills to encourage them passing.
Do we need staff to do that, or should one of us join Cal Bike or Cal Walk or whatever and ask to be more watchful of ongoing legislative agendas?
That is certainly one way, but I think from what I was getting at, which Vice Chair Stone mentioned, is to be able to make an endorsement as a BPAC, we can't just go as individuals and sign up and do that. That would require a motion on BPAC.
A BPAC member could, however, provide an update akin to the VTA BPAC updates to change who does the work of finding out what's going on. However, I'd be interested to know how much work we think it would be for staff to do that, because if it would be a straightforward thing to add a regular slide or occasionally have a slide in the regular staff update, and then if there's anything notable, we could, we probably have to agendize it separately. I'm not going to think about the Brown Act right now. But something like that keeps it low overhead for us, and if it is low overhead for staff, then I think that would be reasonable. If it comes back and it's, this would be a really high overhead request, then I think that means we'd probably want to consider other options in my mind, but it seems worth asking.
I would agree. If staff, the consultant or advocacy firm we already retain is doing it, I would suggest that you forward a copy and bring it to the meeting. If they're not doing it, I don't want to burden staff with that work.
Does that feel consistent with the motion you made?
It does, but the reason why I was specifically asking for it as a work plan item versus a staff update is we cannot take action on things in staff updates. We cannot take a motion in staff updates.
Yes, we would have to agendize it for a future meeting, I think, and
Then it gets, that could, based on our agendas, could delay, being able to take any action.
then
That
maybe
was
we-
my motion was
so
to,
then maybe it'd be a small item like the VTB update typically is.
correct, as needed, not every week, not every month, but as needed. That was my motion, I believe.
All right, yes, I seconded it. Rhea, do you have the motion captured?
Add a regular as-needed work item to receive legislative updates for in-progress legislative items and new legislation that has passed.
Then I will call a vote on this. All in favor of the motion? Aye. I believe that is 4 in favor. All opposed? Member Barton is opposed. The motion passes 4-1 with Member Barton opposed. Do we have more comments on the draft work plan item? I feel like Claudia, you mentioned something earlier.
I do, but this is, and I've spoken to Brandon and Rhea already. This would be maybe most suitable as part of the staff update, but for things that are not the big items that are brought to us at certain, like once a year or once every 2 years or whatever, to get an update on project status. So oftentimes when we're asked to prioritize projects, it's difficult for me to do so not knowing what state other projects are in. So, you know, this one actually is waiting for funding. This one was like, had preliminary design, but then didn't go further. And maybe also colored by what input is shaping, past BPAC input is shaping things. So I don't have a good memory. And so when we were told yesterday that it was BPAC that, maybe I misunderstood, that sent El Monte back to the drawing board by asking for a road reduction. I didn't really recall, and it had been like 3 years. So knowing in any of those 3 intervening years, oh, this is what's happening with El Monte, just like brief updates, or like Sleeper Grant, just that meeting when we had it felt like, okay, this is going. And now, like, you know, it's some years later and it's like, oh, it's waiting for construction, but it sounded like maybe there's still some design needed. I don't know. Or there were things tacked on, like additional intersections. So I feel that I could be more effective if I had some insight into the other things that are not big items that are being brought as part of the work plan. And so I guess my question to staff is, could that be like part of an occasional update or an annual, like the state of projects?
You're asking if it's possible to produce that information?
Yes.
It is possible to produce that.
Okay.
I'm not trying to be glib or anything. I don't mean this any disrespect.
May I ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
It was one of my clarifying questions about, would we see the project dashboard again? And it was no, because it's about to go live. Would that be a source of information for this type of thing? I know that would require us to go look at it, but would that be where we would find kind of the current status of all the projects? Maybe.
You could tell, depending on the level of detail displayed on the dashboard. The downside to providing a lot of detail on that dashboard is it becomes much harder to digest. Currently, it's providing detail of existing funded land. What I think you're asking for is much more detailed because you want to know where the project is in its design process, not just that we put money behind it or that it's done.
For comparison, to make sure I'm understanding what the nature of the request would be. The city of San Jose has a website where you can look at their capital improvement program projects, and you can click through to a project and you'll see this project is in this stage, here's the latest status, here's the contact within the city of San Jose for this project. Is that basically, that's the nature of information that you are looking for? Not necessarily.
Yes, I think that would help a great deal, but what also sometimes helps is knowing, oh, staff during this period is focusing primarily on El Camino Real because of deadlines with Caltrans, or, you know, like what is actually going on and what is like, just because that list could just, you know, say stuff and it won't change for a long time. It's not,
There's no forward-looking aspect necessarily. Well, in something that's just a
I guess
status.
this would be like, it would be ideal if it were flavored by, if it were briefly just mentioned in the meetings as like, here are highlights of what is going on. And then maybe in addition, having this project list, because some of it is CIP, some of it is like other funding, like it's, and it, to be able to refer to that list, but then also know.
More like rolling updates, like, you're like, oh, this project's paused because it's out to bid or whatever, or we don't have project managers, or what happens from
I
between
don't
when
think
we,
it needs to be, I mean, that would be cool. I don't think it needs to be that
or
detailed.
just when something major has changed or something has happened, like to get an update.
Shoot. Okay, sorry. This is all helping me and I'm sorry for coming with an unclear thing. I think just a list that says like, this is in design, or this is paused, or this is like construction anticipated fall 2024 is just fine. But maybe complemented with, this is what staff is actually currently working on.
And
Yeah.
for point of clarification, by staff, do you mean transportation planning staff? Do you mean public works in general? Or without putting too many, trying to, words in your mouth, you mean, probably you mean active transportation projects?
Yes. So for example, that El Monte was being redesigned, or after we reviewed the Castro bikeway from El Camino to California, you know, that was that's not something that then, you know, it's like years before we actually get it to review, but just knowing that is something that due to our feedback or due to something else is.
Forgive me, I was being dense. Active
Sorry.
transportation projects is meaning it, so that's what you
But
would want to know.
I think that there would
Sorry.
be a reasonable distinction. There is some distinction that exists in things like the CIP between like funding for design of a project and funding for construction of a project. Essentially the funding, and there's a question of which staff are we asking for visibility into where they're working on active transportation projects? Are we asking for which projects are Rhea and Brandon working on? Are we asking for which projects is Robert's group working on?
Well, but that's on, as I hear it, that's on me and Rhea to figure that out. You wanna know what's going on with bike and pedestrian projects. That's how I understand what you're saying.
More lightweight, not like these big other presentations, right? Just or smaller changes, right? That sounds interesting to me as well.
Is it a clear request?
Would that be covered like maybe in staff update? Since it wouldn't need public input, it's just kind of a status.
I did not hear a motion.
Okay, remember, I'd like to make a motion for staff to include lightweight updates on their current work on active transportation projects.
Member Fennick, I second the motion.
I'm not clear on frequency that you were asking for these updates.
As need.
second the motion for as needed. Amendment to the motion.
Is that a clear motion or a clear ask?
I think so.
Okay. I think some of the intent is clear at least, and perhaps we can revisit this in a future meeting or future draft work plan, or depending on how quickly this comes back. All right. Any other comments on the motion, or shall I take a vote?
I'm not clear. I guess I'm not clear how much this is gonna actually burden or not burden staff, or like, I don't know what you mean by we can come back to this if we're making a motion. Is this?
Oh, I was saying if we could come back to this, if the nature of the updates as it, so first, it has amendments to the work plan, if it's a substantial amount of work for staff, it does have to get approved by more people, and they may reject that. But if it is approved and then the updates occur and they are less detailed than we would like, then we could ask for increases in the level of detail, or less frequent than we would like, we could ask for increases in level of frequency. If they're more detailed than we need, we could ask for less frequency, although this body would rarely do that. So it's my hope that if we approve this motion and it is a non-trivial addition to staff workload, then we will hear about that.
Thank you.
Is that an accurate assessment?
That makes sense to me.
I think this reflects your interest.
Okay.
And we can kind of go away and see if this is going to be onerous. I think that there are some things that we can probably do as part of the staff updates. Just to let you know, there are some things that are going on, like ducks with their feet flapping under the water, that we actually can't share because they could be part of negotiations for developments, things like that. So there are always things going on like that that are in motion, and we can't, we're not really able to share a status update. But if there are things that change, so for example, in the staff update today, there's an update on Calderon. So, I think things like that are great things to share.
As a question on clarity on the motion, it sounds to me like this could fit in, this could just be an express of interest in these items, and this could be provided in staff update, and may not necessarily, since we already do that, may not necessarily be a work plan change. That sound.
Depends on exactly what I heard was more of a matrix of, these are the projects, this is where they are. And
Maybe we can do them separately.
Do what separately?
The request for a project matrix and the lightweight staff updates.
I feel like the lightweight staff updates we are doing, and so we wouldn't need a motion for that. But, as I understood, you say it and Rhea read it back, that gives us a lot of latitude in exactly what we bring back. And then if it isn't what you're looking for, we will of course listen to that feedback and not necessarily, we'll give you the feedback back also. But at this particular moment, I think it's understandable and something that we can go off of.
Great.
So I heard a motion and a second. Did you want to hear it back? I didn't hear a vote.
We did not take a vote yet, no. Let's read it back and then we'll take a vote.
BPAC requests for staff to include lightweight updates on active transportation projects in regular staff updates as needed.
Thank you. We will now take a vote on that motion. All members in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The vote is unanimous approving the motion. Are there any other comments or motions that people would like to make on item 6.4, the draft fiscal year 23-24 work plan? Great, everyone, we have discussed process appropriately. We will now move to item 6.5, the Santa Clara Valley Transportation Agency Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee update.
Oh, okay. Okay, Central Bikeway, which goes from Santa Clara into San Jose, now has had their final report and conceptual design plans. And also a dollar tag attached that is going to take a lot of funding over the next 10 plus years to realize these plans, but it was nice that they've finalized the concept. Then the VTA had 2050 goals, which is a great list of goals, including things like improving public transit, shifting mode share to active transportation, building lots of infrastructure, and even things like land use. So very comprehensive list of goals that they've presented. And then there's the countywide trails master plan map update. There's a link. I think the deadline is like 3 days from now to to add to it. So this isn't just a map of existing trails, but also where the county would like to extend trails in the future. So it might be good to comment if there are additional trails or trail extensions that you're interested in.
These are county controlled.
Yes, yeah.
That update?
Yeah.
Any additional questions? Great. Do we have any public comments on the BPAC update? No, we do not. Any committee comments on the BPAC update? We will look forward, you will plan to do a written update for the next meeting? Great, we'll look forward to a written update in June.
Member Fennick, the only comment I had is like, and I think I saw an email, but with the link. I think it's done.
Oh, good.
But yeah, I think that's been out, so that's great. I will look for that. Thank you.
Great. All right, with that, we will move to item 7.1, staff comments.
And we have our update. On April 11th and 19th, we had a smart cycling training. Transportation Manager Lowe, is there anything you'd like to say about that?
Yeah, I attended, and Ben Putcher attended, and so did Terry. So there were also some other people. Mountain View was well represented, and so hopefully we will get some league certified instructors out of the process.
And on April 13th, we had the Castro Bikeway feasibility study community feedback event. You can see a picture here of folks after the event had concluded. We brought the boards outside into the vestibule for people to continue to talk to us and provide feedback. But it was long-term and short-term alternatives too, as recommended by the BPAC, were positively received by the public. There was a request from the public to bring the raised mid-block crossings that are in the long term into the short term. That has found its way into the plan from their suggestions. April 22nd, we had the Earth Day ride and tabling. So you have the picture here, which was an 8.5 mile ride. We are on the top of a Vista slope, and wasn't sure that was going to work, but nobody crashed. We rode up, we rode down. People really liked it, so that was good. And we had Pam from the View Historical Society speak about the history of the area. And from there, we went to the Rookery, had a representative from the Audubon Society talk about the birds at Shorebird Way. We talked about some green streets on Central Avenue and headed back so people could also enjoy the Earth Day event, for which Rhea was at the event the entire time. And then also on the 22nd, myself, Parks Department, attended Sunshine Gardens Apartments Earth Day event. This was a big part of Member Stone did a lot of work to help organize that and get people to show up. The mayor was there. Member Stone, everybody's thinking about it.
Better attended than I thought it would be. It's just, it's I live, but the manager there is not a bike person, but very much an earth person, and wanted me to come talk about biking groceries because I do that, and she noticed, I guess. Anyway, it was good. It was a lot of fun, and I was very happy with how it turned out.
Seemed like 30 or 40 people.
Yeah, publicity was good.
And then on April 25th, the council selected the eastern alignment for the Bernardo undercrossing. Alignment with the BPAC had suggested. We have a picture there of the transportation manager urging sustainability. Next slide. Here to go. April 6th and the 10th, we had on the 6th the lowering of the speed limit on Calderon, and then on the 10th we had stop signs brought to Mercy. Calderon. Had a lot of several positive aspects in reference to those changes.
I didn't know we were like Procter and Gamble with new and improved on our speed limit signs. The new version of Tide is out.
Then this is the upcoming items. So music on Castro on the 200 block, I believe, is going to begin here in May, every Wednesday from 5 to 6:45 p.m. So look for that. And on May 9th, the active transportation plan outreach will begin. So we are in the process of finalizing the survey questions and the data instrument, and I can say that the tool we're using to geographically collect this information looks really good. It's very slick and user-friendly. May 9th, the city council considered consideration of the outdoor patio standards and guidelines. So that's a good thing. On May 15th, Castro Bikeway feasibility study will go to the council transportation committee. So it's everything that you guys have seen in the past, plus the movement that we've received from the raised crosswalks from long-term to short-term, going to the CTC, and with their approval, we'll move on to council. Then May is Bike Month. I won't spend too much time on this because everyone minus member Barton got to see this yesterday. But we are looking for your help at the Energizer station. Your friends' help, you specifically, member Chair Kuzumal was there last year. So please help us. You can sign up, send me an email. I've probably already sent you the link, but if you want, I'll send you the link again and you can sign up to help us out. Those are at the 3 locations that the city is partnering with. And then there are also 2 locations the city has nothing to do with, which is great. Some private businesses and nonprofits putting those on. And then you have Ask MB reports. So as you guys know, we haven't had it in a while, just due to staffing constraints in order to get through view them. November, you have seen before, I was able to process 3 months. That leaves us with March and April that I was not able to get processed through for this meeting. And let me give you a quick, so you can see the general pattern. So overall, we're on the same page. December, a little bit lower for near misses. Sure. It's hard to make patterns with those. But we do have some information. So some notable items developed in December. Request for improved access to Los Altos High School via Ringstorf. And this is something that member Adamick had mentioned earlier. We had a lot of input in December from students, from teachers, from member Adamick to make that happen. And then we did get several indications that the sidewalk was being blocked by parked cars, trash, or plants in December. And finally, we did have requests for improvements on our trail bridges as they're slippery. And I can say that we have responded to that by reaching out to Palo Alto, who is testing various different treatments on their trail bridges. And when they complete their tests, they'll share that data with us. And we'll have a product that we can use tested locally to help improve the traction on our trail bridges.
At one time, I thought there was a deck replacement capital improvement project for the Long Bridge on the Stevens Creek Trail. Is that?
I don't know.
It does sound familiar.
Yeah, I mean, there is a vendor which makes composite deck surfaces specifically for replacing timbers. I wish Palo Alto would consider that. It's used at Lake Tahoe now, and I believe the closest one I'm aware of is a bridge in Newark on the East Bay, but it doesn't wear, it's all weather. It's lighter from structural reasons, and if you're building new, it's got flexibility. The Bull Park Trail in Palo Alto could certainly use replacement. Use the Wilkie Bridge where the test is being conducted several times a week and improved, but could be better.
Thank you.
Yes, make your comments on the Wilkie Bridge.
Okay. In January, we had a request for sidewalk where there isn't any. So I thought that was notable, and I'm bringing that to you. And then also we had similar comments about cars blocking the sidewalk, trash and plants blocking the sidewalk. In February, we had 11 requests for mid-block crossing improvements at Cuesta and Bonita. And fortunately, we were able to respond, in a positive manner to all of those requests by the indication of the Grant Sleeper and other intersections. One of the other intersections is Cuesta and Bonita. So those requests will figure into that design process when they select what type of treatment to take for them. And then perhaps not unexpectedly, we had lots of down trees blocking the sidewalk in February, meant to be moved. And then finally, in December and January, we had two ask and fees related to the Castro Pet Mall or Streets program. In December, we had one request that the flashing lights at Villa, they preferred the way it used to be with flashing lights at Villa than the full signal control that we currently have at Villa. And then another request for the downtown Pet Mall cleaner. And then finally, in January, we had a request to bring back the tents due to the rain and people wanting to utilize the tents in any conditions. That is all I have for the staff update. Questions?
Any clarifying questions on the staff update? Everything.
You're doing a crowdsourced bike ride on May 13th. When do you need the suggestions by? Or was that in the past?
No, it is not. No, it is not in the past. I'd appreciate them by the 9th. If that's a Thursday, so the 10th. Memory is right, which is 1 week before. No, oh my gosh, the ride is on the 13th. I'm so sorry. I'd appreciate them by the 7th.
Member Atomic?
What happens in the trash plant, et cetera, sidewalk blocking?
So when it's the trash or plants, that gets referred to the streets department or plants, possibly code violations, and then goes out there, gives notice, and if the homeowner doesn't clear it and the city clears it, leave charges are provided. When it comes to the car blocking the sidewalk, I believe that should be sent over to PD. And I will leave myself a note to see that that's actually happening. These don't get routed directly to me. These three types of things go to different divisions, but still to see that they're happening. So let me look to see how our process is for those cars blocking the sidewalk. I personally know that the vegetation process works really well. I've done them, seen them happen in me. I'll check to see how the car issue is addressed.
Additional questions? All right, so now, are there any public comments on the staff report?
I have no hands for public
All
comment.
right, thank you. Any committee comments on the staff report?
I think I know what Terry's talking about, I don't know, maybe in a different part, but in Tahoe, there is, a lot of bike trails through, what is a marshy area, and they've got all these little bridges, and they had been in the last couple of years replaced with a synthetic type material that lasts through the Tahoe winters and summers and springs, and it still is for riding on. So there's, I think, it's maybe kind of too vague, but I think I know what you're talking about, and it's really nice for riding on and walking on.
It reduces maintenance costs, so in the long term, it's generally cheaper.
Additional comments? All right, seeing none, we'll move to item 7.2, committee comments. Are there any committee comments on unagendized items?
And I should probably file and ask me about this, but I'm not taking action on it, so I don't think I can accuse myself from my own street. I live on what's classified as a narrow street, and we have a new kind of mini park path that was put in recently on Hetch Hetchy land that connects to another park on Hetch Hetchy land, tot lot. There's a great crosswalk put in between, it's a mid-block crossing. And so there's a sign in the middle of the street that says yield to pedestrians. And then the way that red striping is, cars can park really close to that crosswalk. So as a driver, I'm often forced to drive the wrong direction to get down my street to go around that sign that says yield to pedestrians, and other cars are as well. So I would say from a design, I'll file one for the specific thing, but from a design standpoint, those yield to pedestrians and crosswalk signs in the middle of a crosswalk, maybe not appropriate for a narrow street. When I'm driving, doesn't give me room to yield around people that might be elsewhere, and to see pedestrians because where the cars aren't and stuff.
Are there any additional unagendized committee comments? Member Doc?
Yes, I mean, I guess this was mentioned in the staff report, but I love the improvements on Calderon. But I think it's also an example of like completely under the radar stuff. Like, I haven't been on this committee that long, but in all the time, I don't remember Calderon being mentioned. And it's the thing where like, I bike into it and I'm like, this is so amazing, thank you for doing it, but I had no idea. And then on a couple of days ago, I was biking from Phyllis going to Calderon and just feeling good about that. And like, I see so many bicyclists. And then there was a bicyclist who had a basket on her rear rack with like a little tent structure, and there was a dog with aviator goggles. And I was like, this is it, we've arrived, it's good biking here. So.
All right. Any additional committee comments?
I'll say one, so I'm exploring the enforcement process for Costco's bike parking. And want to follow that through to understand how we put more teeth and get cooperation of entities that aren't part of the city in promoting biking and walking and at least living up to their obligations.
Anything else? All right, do you have any public comments on the committee comments?
No.
Okay, are there any committee we can't take action on any of these items, so, yeah. We will now move to item 8, setting the date and time for the next meeting, which will be Wednesday, June 27th. I thought I saw a different thing on the
28th.
Yeah, the agenda says 27th.
Apology.
The next BPAC meeting will be Wednesday, June 28th at 6:30 p.m. And that brings us to item 9, which is the calendar. There will be meetings on August 30th, September 27th, and October 25th, all at 6:30, all on Wednesdays. And all these meetings will be both in person and on Zoom.
Yes.
Lovely.
Committee members.
Committee members will all be in person still, though. And this brings us to our favorite item. No, it doesn't?
And they will be in the plaza, not in here where this shouldn't happen in the plaza.
Okay, so with hopefully more reliable Zoom connections as well. And so this brings us to our favorite item, which is item 10, adjournment, and we are adjourned.
Awesome, thank you.
Not my favorite.
I have another committee that follows Robert.